History isn't just forgotten, it's buried. Some secrets are meant to stay lost. Until now.
Imagine a map of Europe in the 5th century. The mighty Roman Empire, the great unifier, the source of law, order, and civilization, is a shattered ruin. Its roads are overgrown, its cities are falling to decay, and its legacy is being swallowed by the chaos of what historians would later call the Dark Ages. It's a familiar story of collapse and decline. We've been taught that for the next several centuries, Europe plunged into an era of ignorance and instability. What if that story is only half true? What if, while one empire crumbled, another was rising? Not in the traditional power centers of Europe, but just across the water, in Africa. Because as the Roman world fell apart, a powerful new force was building a civilization of unprecedented size, wealth, and intellectual might. And in the year 711, this force, led by African generals and their armies, launched a lightning-fast invasion of Europe. In a matter of years, they conquered a vast territory, planting the seeds of a new society that would shine like a beacon for the next 800 years. This is the unwritten history of Al-Andalus, the most advanced kingdom in medieval Europe. This is the story of how African kings, scholars, and warriors built a golden age on European soil, and why their incredible legacy was nearly erased from our history books. To understand this monumental shift, we must first look at the state of Europe in the early 8th century. The Iberian Peninsula was under the rule of the Visigothic kingdom, a Christian monarchy that was weak, internally divided, and deeply unpopular. A civil war for the throne was tearing the kingdom apart, leaving its borders vulnerable. Across the Strait of Gibraltar, a new power had emerged: the Umayyad Caliphate, a massive Islamic empire centered in Damascus, had expanded rapidly, bringing the majority of North Africa under its control. From the city of Tangier, a formidable military force was assembled. Its leadership was a mix of Arab generals and highly skilled Berber commanders from the region. The Caliphate's ambitious general, Musa ibn Usair, set his sights on the chaos-ridden peninsula. His chief lieutenant, a brilliant Berber commander named Tariq ibn Ziyad, was tasked with leading the initial charge. In April 711, with just 7,000 soldiers, mostly North African Berbers, he crossed the strait and landed on a rock that would forever bear his name, Jabal Tariq, or the Mountain of Tariq, known to us today as Gibraltar. The invasion was a lightning strike. In the decisive Battle of Guadalete, Tariq's forces utterly defeated the Visigothic army, killing their king and shattering their command structure. The speed of the conquest shocked the world. With the Visigothic resistance crumbled, Tariq and his forces marched north, taking city after city. Within just a few years, almost the entire peninsula was under their control. This wasn't just a military conquest. It was a societal revolution. The Umayyad commanders found that much of the local population, oppressed by the Visigoths, welcomed the new rulers. They brought with them a system of religious tolerance, stability, and a promise of a new, prosperous future. The stage was set for the birth of a new civilization, one that would redefine the very idea of Europe. The land they had conquered was no longer to be known as Iberia. It was now Al-Andalus. And what blossomed there was a civilization unlike anything the European continent had seen in centuries. While the rest of Europe was struggling with feudalism and intellectual stagnation, Al-Andalus became a crucible of progress. Cordoba, the new capital, was the shining jewel of the medieval world. With a population of over 500,000, it was the largest city in Europe, boasting paved streets, public lighting, and a sophisticated water system. Compare that to Paris or London at the time, which were little more than muddy towns with populations in the tens of thousands. The heart of Cordoba was its magnificent Great Mosque, a masterpiece of architecture that blended Roman, Visigothic, and Islamic styles. Its hypostyle hall with its double arches and its exquisite prayer niche remain a testament to the sophistication and wealth of this new society. This was a city built on a foundation of knowledge and artistry. Agriculture flourished with the introduction of new irrigation techniques and crops like oranges, lemons, rice, and sugarcane, which had never been seen in Europe before. This led to a boom in trade and commerce that connected Al-Andalus to a vast network stretching across North Africa, the Middle East, and even as far as India. The economy thrived, and with it, a new era of intellectual and artistic freedom. This was a society built on the principles of reason and tolerance. Christians and Jews, while paying a tax, were free to practice their religions, and their scholars and artists were encouraged to contribute to the intellectual life of the kingdom. The seeds of a new world were being sown in the sun-drenched fields of what was once a fallen Roman province. The leaders who presided over this golden age were not just distant figures. They were often powerful and brilliant African and Arab Berber rulers whose stories have been largely forgotten in the European narrative. One of the most remarkable was Abd al-Rahman I, a young Umayyad prince who escaped the bloody purges in Damascus and, in a harrowing journey, made his way to Al-Andalus. In 756, he established an independent emirate, refusing to bow to the new Abbasid Caliphate. His story is one of incredible perseverance, military genius, and political acumen. He was a refugee who became a king and built a dynasty that would last for 3 centuries. His descendant, Abd al-Rahman III, declared himself caliph, cementing Al-Andalus's independence and ushering in its most prosperous era. His reign was a golden age of diplomacy, arts, and learning. He was a patron of scholars, builders, and poets. He built the stunning palace city of Madinat al-Zahra, a symbol of the caliphate's immense wealth and power. But the story isn't just about the Umayyad rulers. The true heart of Al-Andalus's strength was its diverse population and its Berber leadership. The armies that conquered the land were overwhelmingly Berber, and they continued to be a crucial part of the ruling class. One of the most feared and respected generals was Al-Mansur, a Berber warrior who was the de facto ruler of Al-Andalus for decades. His military campaigns were legendary, and he expanded the kingdom's influence far and wide. These were the rulers, the scholars, and the generals who were at the heart of this last kingdom. Their legacy wasn't just in the palaces they built or the battles they won, but in the society they created. A society that valued knowledge, promoted art, and, for a time, allowed different faiths to live side by side. If you were a scholar in medieval Europe, there was only one place to go for knowledge: Al-Andalus. While most of Europe's great libraries had been destroyed or left to crumble, the libraries of Cordoba and Toledo housed tens of thousands of manuscripts. This was a place where knowledge was not just preserved, it was actively created and translated. Scholars from across the world came here, including Christian monks and Jewish rabbis, to translate ancient texts. The works of Aristotle, Plato, and Euclid, lost to the rest of Europe for centuries, were rediscovered here. They were translated from Greek into Arabic, then into Latin, and then dispersed back to the rest of the continent. It's no exaggeration to say that without the scholars of Al-Andalus, the European Renaissance may never have happened. The most profound advancements were in science and mathematics. The scholars of Al-Andalus introduced Europe to algebra, a term derived from the Arabic word al-jabr. They developed trigonometry, perfected astronomical instruments like the astrolabe, and created the first surgical instruments. Doctors in Al-Andalus performed cataract surgeries and perfected the art of dissection, centuries ahead of their European counterparts. In fields from medicine to agriculture, Al-Andalus was the undisputed leader. They developed the concept of the quarantine to fight disease. They created complex irrigation systems to make arid land fertile. Their universities were the first in Europe, predating institutions like Oxford and Bologna. This was the intellectual engine of Europe. The knowledge created here by African and Arab scholars was so advanced that it was both coveted and feared. But this golden age of learning would not last forever. In the north, a new kind of power was rising, a power with a singular focus on reclaiming the land. While Al-Andalus flourished, a quiet but determined resistance was building in the northern mountains of the Iberian Peninsula. Small Christian kingdoms like Leon, Castile, and Aragon began to slowly push south. This movement, known as the Reconquista or Reconquest, would define the next several centuries of European history. The Reconquista wasn't a single, unified war. It was a long, complex series of battles, sieges, and political maneuvering. For a time, it was a low-intensity conflict, with periods of peace and even alliances between Christian and Muslim rulers. But the ultimate goal was always clear: to retake the lands that had been lost. As the centuries passed, the Christian kingdoms grew stronger and more unified. They learned from their opponents, adopting Al-Andalus's military tactics, architecture, and even their scientific advancements. The very knowledge that was helping to fuel the European Renaissance was also being used to wage war against the civilization that had created it. The religious fervor also began to intensify. The Crusades, which were taking place in the Middle East, fueled a new kind of zealousness in Europe. The fight in Iberia was framed not just as a territorial dispute, but as a holy war to reclaim Christian lands. The peaceful coexistence that had once defined Al-Andalus began to fray under the pressure of this new, aggressive Christian expansionism. The age of the last kingdom was slowly drawing to a close. By the 13th century, Al-Andalus had fragmented. Its once mighty caliphate was no more, broken into a series of smaller, often warring kingdoms. The Christian advance was relentless. City after city fell. Córdoba, Seville, Valencia. The last remaining kingdom was the Nasrid dynasty in the south, centered around the beautiful and impregnable city of Granada. Granada was a marvel of engineering and art. Perched atop a hill, it was defended by a network of fortresses and surrounded by fertile lands. The Nasrid kings ruled from their stunning palace, the Alhambra, a fortress and palace complex of unparalleled beauty. Its intricate stone carvings, serene courtyards, and flowing fountains were a final testament to the golden age of Al-Andalus. For over 200 years, the Nasrid dynasty held out, a last vestige of the African-influenced rule in Europe. The final ruler, Sultan Boabdil, inherited a kingdom under siege. The combined forces of Castile and Aragon, led by the legendary monarchs Ferdinand II and Isabella I, were closing in. Their reign marked a turning point. They were no longer content with simply pushing back. They were determined to unify the entire peninsula under a single Christian crown. They were no longer content with simply pushing back. They were determined to unify the entire peninsula under a single Christian crown. The story of Granada's last stand is one of tragedy, defiance, and heartbreak. The Nasrid kings, their power dwindling, had to navigate a complex web of diplomacy and military strategy. But in the end, they were simply outmatched. The last kingdom was on its final breath, and the forces of a new Europe were at its gates. The siege of Granada began in 1491. For months, the city was surrounded, its supply lines cut off. The Christian army was massive, and its leaders, Ferdinand and Isabella, were ruthless. Inside the walls, the people of Granada were starving. Their final king, Sultan Boabdil, had to make an impossible choice. He could continue to fight a losing battle, or he could surrender and save his people. On January 2nd, 1492, Sultan Boabdil rode out of the city and handed the keys of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella. It was a moment that symbolized the end of an era. As he left, legend says he paused on a hill overlooking his city and wept. This hill is now known as the Last Sigh of the Moor. The fall of Granada was more than just a military victory. It was a cultural and religious one. The terms of the surrender were initially generous, promising religious freedom and protection for the Muslim population. But those promises were quickly broken. The Spanish Inquisition, established just a few years earlier, was now given full reign to convert or expel anyone who was not Catholic. This was the final act of the Reconquista, a culmination of centuries of warfare. With the last Muslim kingdom gone, the Christian monarchs could now declare their complete dominance over the entire Iberian Peninsula. The door to a new, unified, and exclusively European identity had been firmly shut. The fall of Granada marked the end of the last kingdom in Europe, but it was just the beginning of a different kind of war, a war on memory. For the centuries that followed, the history of Al-Andalus was carefully rewritten by the victors. The story of a vibrant, multicultural society was replaced with a narrative of a long, glorious crusade. The achievements in science, mathematics, and philosophy were reattributed to Christian scholars or simply ignored. The profound influence of African and Arab scholars was downplayed. The magnificent mosques of Cordoba and Seville were either torn down or converted into churches. The grand monuments were either destroyed or had their history scrubbed clean. This historical erasure was deliberate. For the new unified Spanish kingdom, a history of foreign rule was inconvenient. It was much easier to create a national identity built on the myth of a continuous, uninterrupted Christian tradition. The story of the golden age of Al-Andalus, of its African kings and its thriving tolerant society, became a footnote, an asterisk in the grand narrative of European history. The victors got to write the history, and they wrote a version that served their purpose. A version that portrayed the reconquest as a noble and just cause, rather than a brutal conquest. A version that largely ignored the contributions of the very people who had created the most advanced civilization in Europe for 800 years. But history, like the tides, always finds a way to return. The legacy of Al-Andalus is not truly gone. It is woven into the very fabric of Spain and Portugal, and by extension, the rest of Europe. Look at the architecture of the south of Spain, at the stunning mosaics and the horseshoe arches of the Alhambra. Look at the Spanish language itself, which is filled with Arabic loanwords, from azúcar, sugar, to almohada, pillow. Look at the food, the music, and the very soul of the culture. The last kingdom never truly vanished. The story of Al-Andalus is a vital reminder that European history is far richer and more complex than we are often taught. It's a testament to the power of cultural exchange and the devastating consequences of intolerance. It proves that the Dark Ages were not a universal experience. The story of the Last Kingdom is not just a tale of the past. It's a challenge to our understanding of the present. It asks us to look beyond the narratives we have been given and to search for the hidden truths, the unwritten histories, and the echoes of empires that still resonate today. This is the real story of the Last Kingdom, and it's time it was told. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more history like this. See you in the next video.